You very much. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be able to deliver this presentation. We thought we'd kind of maybe start with a sort of a state of play a presentation to really give everybody an opportunity to see where we are, what's actually been happening in this whole crazy world of telco, cloud native, open source, and obviously let's not forget AI as well. So we'll start with a quick intro to me. So I'm Richard Simon. I work as a Chief Technology Officer for the T-Systems International, and I'm working in the Cloud Professional Services group. So I've been really long time in IT and done all sorts of different types of roles in the past and worked for a number of vendors as well as system integrators as well. And my sort of advocacy really is around cloud computing, cloud native and open source, and obviously Gen AI. Those are kind of the areas I really tend to focus on. I also do lots of conference speaking, such as this one, and also have a angle in sort of doing my own conversations on YouTube as well. Okay, so let's look at the agenda. So as we said, we're kind of going to do a quick telco sort of state of play. Then look at the actual cloud native space, see what's actually happening there, and the open source space, and how those are kind of like really affecting sort of that whole landscape really for both enterprises and telcos as well. We'll also focus a little bit on multi-cloud because that's actually affecting really the telcos and enterprises as well in terms of their strategy for cloud and so on, and how some new areas in that sort of multi-cloud space are also coming in. Then we'll focus a little bit more on Gen AI and kind of where that is at the moment and where that's going to go, and then try and draw some conclusions. As I said, we'll try and include also some time for you towards the end for doing a Q&A. Okay, so telco state of play. Let's see where we are at the moment. So obviously, there's a huge sort of digital disruption happening. I won't go through all of this. It's just really kind of to show you an indicator. Everything really from sort of having a mobile workforce all the way to sort of obviously generative AI, in terms of coding and infrastructure as code and sort of the data space and so on are all being affected. And somewhere in between all of that is things like digital transformation, data migrations, cloud economics, of course, and various other areas all being affected. So clearly, IT has a huge challenge, and telco obviously within that space is being affected by all of these as well. So really our cloud maturity model has to be sort of somewhat more sort of strategic and a little bit more clever and certainly well thought out and well-rounded as well. Now, this is a bit of an eye chart, so I'm not going to expect you to kind of pick up all the details here, but essentially what this is saying is our cloud strategy really needs to be quite mature. Okay, in terms of telco, well, we've seen kind of the softwareization, if you like, kind of disrupting the telco market. This has kind of really led to different types of approaches to how we do telco and everything in between. And there's kind of that sort of transformational sort of process that's happening in the telco space. So this whole kind of carrier business model, each telco kind of really positioning themselves to kind of deal with the changes in the environment. And then that translates to really a kind of a splintering of the whole sort of telco space. You get a lot more competition from the sort of the smaller and newer kind of startups and players, and those are kind of piggybacking, if you like, their services on those existing players as well. And that's kind of, I think, a landscape that we're going to see will just continue to really operate, as it has been, and will continue to really mature as it goes forward as well. I think the diversification is already here. So we've kind of seen the smaller players, like I said, there's kind of the startup players to the more established players. So we'll see a lot more of that kind of activity happening, well into the 2030s. Now, obviously, 5G and then obviously most likely 6G as it will come up as well has a role to play. So there's lots of different types of trends again going into the sort of the 2030s. So we'll see lots of kind of fluidity in terms of how really organizations are going to be really playing in this space. And this sort of whole area of technologies, is going to change. So you're going to see everything from sort of the initial triggers to a lot of these technologies, all the way to the actual effects, and then kind of the industry, the technology, and then the consumer or the use case of those all coming in as well. So again, a number of areas. Not going to go into the sort of the full chart, but it's kind of just there to give you an indicator that as triggers kind of come in terms of how we communicate, how we connect, how we do things like the internet in the future, and so on. The telco space will actually change and morph to actually cope with that and deal with that. Okay, so cloud native and open source. Are we kind of there? Are we kind of looking at a maturity sort of layer? Well, open source itself has kind of diversified a lot. Again, this is an eye chart, so I don't expect you to pick up on this, but it's essentially the CNCF, or the Cloud Native Computing Foundation's cloud native landscape. So this is kind of just showing you some of the projects that are actively being developed by the CNCF. So clearly, open source kind of moved beyond just being Linux, really, and then maybe a few sort of major projects, although we do still have those kind of major projects like Kubernetes and so on. But certainly the cloud native space has matured. A lot of customers, a lot of enterprises and telcos are actually making use of it, including the likes of Deutsche Telekom, our parent company. So we're really making use of all this technology as we go along. And as kind of new trends come up, like AI and so on, we'll see that things like Gen AI will be affecting the landscape as we go forward. So one of the areas that's really picked up recently is platform engineering. And this is a kind of a new development, and it's really trying to sort of provide a difference between kind of where DevOps has been, where things like site reliability engineering, or SRE, is really kind of providing the support for our services in the cloud, and really kind of how we build and orchestrate our sort of cloud infrastructure, if you like, our cloud tooling, our cloud development platforms, and so on. So platform engineering is all about really kind of building a consistent sort of developer platform, and the idea is there too that we can actually deliver that as a template essentially of our software and workloads. So obviously DevOps is affected by this. So we're kind of really moving that platform engineering aspect that we were doing under sort of DevOps into a kind of its own right. So we're now looking really at kind of DevOps really reaching a sort of a modernization stage, or essentially having a sort of a shift left approach to how we do DevOps. So platform engineering affects all that. As we said, it's already more about getting developers to do more development. It's removing that sort of cognitive load, bringing in, as we said, standardization as platform engineering builds our tools and products and workflows, and brings in more consistency as well, and various other things. So all of these are really designed to kind of remove that toil from developers and really help us to be able to take things forward in a more standardized and consistent way. So that's really kind of the effect that that platform engineering is having on DevOps. Now, I've written an article on this. If you're interested in having a look at that, go to the T-Systems website and have a look at the article around DevOps. Okay, so we said multi-cloud. As we said, the kind of the convergence of various things is happening, and we're really kind of going into or have been really in a sort of a multi-cloud environment for a number of years now. So digitalization is really kind of forcing that as we kind of have on-prem sort of dropping, and then sort of public cloud really rising as well. So that's kind of leading us into that sort of multi-cloud world. So obviously there's a number of benefits for doing multi-cloud. You can avoid vendor lock-in. Believe it or not, cost optimization is one of those things. So it might actually sound in reverse of that, but actually it does help you to kind of really focus where your workloads are going to be and kind of run the right cloud for the right workload essentially. And obviously as to things like resiliency and so on. The other aspect that we're seeing a lot of changes in is also in the cloud economic space. So we've kind of talked a lot about sort of cost management and things like that in the cloud. But now we actually really want to see that sort of splintering up a little bit, or breaking up a little bit, and kind of giving us lots of options. So whereas before it was kind of 2 options, I found actually from attending a few conferences last year, there's actually 3 options. So our sort of traditional FinOps, which is a bit more of a strategic framework type of approach. Cloud cost management is kind of laser focused on particular areas of optimization and is done essentially in real time. And that kind of gives you quicker ROI, for example. But also when you're actually developing applications, whether you're a telco or really an enterprise, profiling is a new area that's kind of really come in as well. And this sort of comes in on the sort of the other side of the coin of application performance monitoring, and gives you cloud cost savings in terms of optimizing how your application is actually developed. And certainly in order to avoid things like the CrowdStrike sort of outage from last year, we really do want to kind of look at things like multi-cloud and various other technologies are available to us to avoid this type of thing happening in the future. Also, certain decisions that have been made around things like VMware, for example, which has been a hugely established hypervisor. So the acquisition by Broadcom has also forced us to look at kind of alternative ways in terms of how we actually do our virtualization in the future. And maybe this is actually a good opportunity for us to replace this type of hypervisor approach and virtual machine approach with a more modern orchestration and container approach. Okay, so where is Gen AI? So Gartner was really kind of a little bit confused on this. In some cases, kind of puts out really good messaging around sort of where Gen AI is. As we can see, we have a kind of a AI tech sandwich here to kind of give us a sort of a framework of how we perceive it. So it depends on the type of AI that you're going to do. There's a number of layers that you really need to kind of consider and look at in terms of that approach. However, the other aspect of it is really kind of the expectations of AI. So there is some disappointment in terms of the ROI for Gen AI sort of workloads and so on. So we have to kind of look at that in maybe a little bit more of a balanced sort of view. So our perspective really has to match the reality and the kind of the tangible sort of results or outcomes of what we're seeing in Gen AI. Gen AI is not easy to do. Lots of organizations are still trying to get to grips with it. So we have had some false starts. So in the sort of the low code, no code, or the code gen, AI code gen sort of space, we've had some false starts in that. So some early sort of startups in that space, promised the world as far as sort of having a software engineer as part of your team, and a lot of this has actually been kind of really debunked recently. So that has had an effect in this sort of space in terms of trust, in terms of consistency, and so on. But there are some really good results as well that we're seeing from Gen AI as well. So OpenAI's more recent platforms like Strawberry, which was launched last year, has been quite impressive. A lot of the same people have kind of been critical of the sort of the early startups in the AI sort of code gen space. They've actually been impressed with the later models that have come out. Now, don't forget that in all of this stuff, we have to maintain that Gen AI is really a HPC workload. That's all it is. So when we're actually doing training, if you are brave enough to do your own foundational model sort of training or pre-training, and then kind of do the customization of that of your sort of foundational model, then you do need to kind of keep that in mind, really. And that's Gen AI is really, and training of LLMs is really an HPC workload. Excuse me. So in the rush, as we said, to kind of implement the chart on the right shows you that there has been an investment in Gen AI. But really, as you can see on the left-hand side chart, only about 9% of that is in production. In fact, if you see some of the projects on the summit that I attended earlier this year, the Gen AI Summit in London, we saw actually a number of the presenters there were saying that they've actually been kind of doing their sort of proof of concept for over 12 months. So it's going to take a long time to implement, and I think that's kind of really backing up this Gartner chart on the left in terms of still actively assessing and still piloting being the kind of the major parts of that sort of state of Gen AI at the moment. Yeah, so this again kind of points back to that sort of disappointment that we said in the IT press. I don't believe really a lot of the what people are saying in the in the IT press. So the reality is somewhat different from that. So we need to keep an eye on kind of how things are developing in that, and also obviously in terms of the projects that we have experience with as well. And again, so again from the Gen AI Summit in London, we saw that actually if you're kind of going to do your own Gen AI, this will be slow and hairy, as as people called it at the summit. So it was really it's really interesting to kind of make sure that we choose the right AI for the approach that we want. So DIY AI is kind of doing it yourself. It's really kind of going to be a lot more difficult to actually implement. Okay, excuse me. So Gartner's actually put a really good chart together. This chart really shows us sort of, if you're either going to build it yourself or you're going to buy the Gen AI models. And this really is equally applicable to telcos and enterprises. There's no difference in terms of that. The application of what you use it for, whether it's a chatbot, and there's obviously lots of use cases, internal use to kind of processing documents, or really even kind of looking at your sort of telco network and generating code and configuration for that. There's really no difference in that. How you adopt it is really is kind of equal to both sides of the enterprise and the telco space. So we go from slightly weirdly from right to left in this chart. So if you're kind of going to build it yourself and start from scratch, you're really kind of responsible for everything, including the foundation model, all the way to kind of really just consuming it as a kind of a SaaS type of solution. Maybe that's kind of more for enterprises, whereas the telcos would probably kind of look at building their own models, fine tuning those models, and so on as you kind of go through the chart. So I wrote an article last year in March, which I thought was really, for me, was very very important to kind of get the thinking out, because Gartner's actually kind of really backed up a lot of that thinking that I put into that chart. And I kind of broke down this Gartner chart into essentially what I thought would be kind of 3 areas of implementation. So either kind of an AI infrastructure as a service, and that's kind of the build side of the chart, and all the way to, as we said, sort of an AI SaaS solution on the left-hand side of the chart. And somewhere in between that is kind of what I would call a kind of a foundation model as a service. So we actually get the pre-trained model, and then you fine-tune the model. And again, that's kind of reflected in the Gartner chart here. And again, that's part of the article, as I said, that I wrote last year. So I'll give you some details on that later on, and there'll be some hyperlinks on the slides available for you. Okay, so as you're going to do Gen AI, and I'm sure that everybody's going to be doing that, I don't think anybody's going to be left out. It's really important that we continue our compliance with regulations in our market sectors, whether it's telco or finance or general enterprise or whatever. If we are going to deal with customer and consumer data, then really that data, especially during the inference stage, which is kind of when your AI model is up and running and being interacted with, the that inference stage may well be consuming a lot of and gathering a lot of data from its interaction with with customers and potentially sort of end users as well. And if that is the case, then data sovereignty is really important for that. You have to make sure that the data that you're gathering, which might be affecting GDPR and so on, would be affected by that. And you need to make sure that you actually have some kind of sovereignty to that data. And again, I wrote an article in regards to this, so have a look at that. This kind of talks a little bit more about sort of AI and where things are actually going in regards to kind of sovereignty and so on. Okay, so let's draw some conclusions. The tech trends, I think that I kind of want you to really look at and be aware of are these three. So in the AI space, that sort of Gen AI space, AI agents, which we've not really had time to kind of cover a great deal, but that's kind of really the next frontier for Gen AI. And as we saw kind of 2024 being the year of experimentation of Gen AI in general, we're seeing that 2025 and possibly 2026 is going to be the year of sort of AI agent experimentation. That's kind of where we look at doing pilots and proof of concepts and so on around that. And there is obviously an expectation that the whole sort of agentic AI economy. So there's a difference between AI agents and agentic AI, but kind of looking at it as a sort of a whole market, that economy is going to kind of grow exponentially from 2026 and beyond. As kind of some of that experimentation and piloting kind of comes to fruition, and we're seeing a lot more capability as well in in how you actually create AI agents. There's lots of new tools, new platforms that are actually making that sort of process very easy. The other area, as we've mentioned, is cloud economics. So this is kind of the shifting left, if you like, your cloud bills. So we see things like the emergence of those through three layers or three levels of cost optimization, FinOps, cloud cost optimization, and profiling. And again, I've written an article in regards to cloud economics, so do check that out. Feel free to have a look at that, and that goes into a lot more detail about it. And I would say really kind of further investment in our cloud strategy is better than actually looking at the cost and then deciding to repatriate, because I think going backwards is not really going to help our organizations. And as I said, the third one really is around sovereignty. So the rise of kind of this sort of independent cloud computing, where you take your workloads and data and make sure that a lot of that's actually sovereign in terms of your geography or country, organization, or even sort of cloud choices that you make as well. That will certainly become useful, as we said, in that sort of inference stage of your AI model, your Gen AI model. So the data security for that. It's also useful in terms of cloud abstraction. So we kind of mentioned a little bit of that earlier on. And it's also certainly useful for intellectual property protection as well. So sovereignty has kind of two layers. There's this kind of traditional compute data operations kind of layer, but there's kind of this more new and emerging areas, such as the inference of your Gen AI model, as we said, cloud abstraction, so it kind of helps with that, and also protection of your copyright as well. Okay, so how can T-Systems help in all of this? So we are a professional services group. So we offer everything from services in the cloud to advisory to consultancy in various areas, including things like FinOps, VMware advisory, hyperscalers. So working with all the public cloud providers, doing app migration and cloud transformation for our customers, and obviously advising them on sovereignty and delivering sovereignty services as well. Okay, that concludes my presentation. Just a final reminder, I do have, as I said, I am a YouTuber, so I have a sort of a cloud therapist YouTube channel, and that's kind of really kind of focusing on things like cloud native, Gen AI, and open source. Okay, I don't know if there's any questions.
Well, we have one that Richard, that's with a multi-vendor core. How can you tell me how to implement cloud native for 5G? But I'm not really sure if that's that pertinent to this session and whether you want to say anything at all about that.
I can briefly, yeah. I mean,
Thank you.
the all of that spaces has been digitalized. So a lot of the stuff that telcos used to do in kind of their big, massive, proprietary racks is now digital. So with things like network function virtualization, which is a slightly more technical kind of level, but NFV is certainly one of the ways where we've taken those sort of telco services and and made them digital. So now we can kind of splinter and divide the way that we offer our services, and that's one way that telcos can actually afford to divide their services into much smaller components and actually be able to offer that either to consumers to kind of really respond to the market more quickly, or indeed, as we said, kind of those startup telcos that are kind of piggybacking on the existing providers. So network function virtualization, there's lots of different types of ways you can implement that. You can do it in your own data center, or you can also do it in public clouds as well. There's lots of services available for that, but that's certainly one of the ways that you can actually implement that sort of approach.
And I feel like that's talking about NFV sounds somehow curiously old-fashioned. In
Well,
the
it's
generation, in Gen AI era somehow.
it is, but I mean, telcos are still, kind of going through that process. I don't think the telco space tends to, I think, take that sort of longer time to really kind of mature and move forward and adopt some of these technologies. Whereas kind of the enterprise is a little bit more experimental with that. Certainly, kind of in the finance sector, we see a lot more of that capability. So those are kind of more prone and to be kind of the early adopters of cloud native and Gen AI and things like that. So I think these are all still very much valid, and lots of lots of vendors still in the telco space still use them.
Um, this all sounds to me a bit like trying to build a building while there's an earthquake going on. There's just constant kind of change and upheaval, really. But it does sound to me like telcos are stepping cautiously. They're not making uh, rapid decisions. They're taking it very steadily. Although I feel there's this huge kind of pressure, this race mentality that is all buzzing around.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably on two levels. I think the technology level is the slower part. That's kind of the that takes longer maybe for telcos to kind of adopt those technologies, as we said, and to innovate. Whereas the services side of what they're actually offering, what's the latest kind of trends in that, whether it's, I don't know, for consumers, 12-month contracts versus 24-month contracts, and for bulk, it's kind of things like content delivery networks and flexibilities with that and how those operate. I think there's kind of two levels of that. So the technology takes longer to maybe experiment with and innovate with and sort of implement, versus kind of the services taking maybe less time and kind of being more innovative with how they're actually offered.
Well, I guess the network is always going to be have the most caution and be the last because the risk is just so very much higher and
Yes,
exciting things could happen, which
indeed.
aren't necessarily good, exciting things. Richard, thank you very much. That was really interesting, and I hope everybody here enjoyed it. It's a bit of a different take. Thank you very much. We hope to see you soon.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.